For almost 3 years, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia has been the hottest topic on the Eastern fronts. But Kyiv's operations with high-precision weapons have also set off alarm bells in Russia's interior. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has entered such a phase in the last few weeks that the surprises as well as the intensity of the war have escalated. In particular, Ukraine's latest attack with HIMARS missile systems has turned the spotlight back on KSK and its surroundings. The HIMARS and drone attacks on the KSK region, which can be considered as the support point of the Russian army, made the headlines of the world press, with reports that many senior Russian officers lost their lives. So why KSK? What is the HIMARS system? And what exactly is the method of attack? For years, the Russian military's untouchable inland regions have been vulnerable thanks to Ukraine's long-range offensive capabilities. Now, just a few days ago, a reported HIMARS strike shattered the headquarters' immunity by targeting senior officers of Russia's special brigades. What is the significance for the Kremlin and the Russian military of the killing of 3 key officers of the Russian military's command? Beyond the KSK example, can we understand what Ukraine is aiming for with such deep operations? And of course, how can Russia strategize against these attacks? Around these overarching questions, we will analyze the risk of the Russian military losing its top commanders, as well as review how this Ukrainian-sponsored long-range offensive capability affects the Russian front line. We will also shed light on the seriousness of the statistics, mentioning the loss of around 4,100 Russian officers, and examine possible turning points in the course of the war, coming up next week. Guys, Churia, Ukrainian HIMARS missile batteries recently targeted a key military facility in the KSK region of Russia. The facility is reportedly the command center of one of the Russian army's newly created or so-called special brigades. Western and Ukrainian sources claim that the attack was largely based on sudden intelligence, with current contingents being relayed to Ukrainian forces at the last minute. Eyewitnesses say that the civilian security perimeter established immediately after the missile hit reached several kilometers in diameter. Official Russian sources, on the other hand, tried to minimize the issue with the words minor damage. However, leaks in the local Russian press indicate that the HIMARS strike coincided with the officers' gathering and caused massive destruction. The Ukrainian military intelligence states that this operation was carried out with both missile and drone support, and that at least 3 senior officers lost their lives. According to social media sources, one of these 3 officers is the deputy commander of the 155th Marine Brigade. This headquarters in KSK was a critical point for coordination along the border with Ukraine. This region, which we can characterize as Russia's front line, was considered relatively safe until now. However, with the increasing influence of HIMARS and drones, the targeting of this headquarters with a sudden operation caused a serious shock in the Russian army. Why? Because while officers in what is known as behind the front lines think that they can easily plan, their morale and command motivation collapses when they find themselves under missile and drone bombardment one morning. From the first days of the conflict, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been using the rhetoric of special military operations to tell his people that the front line is far away and our country is safe. However, this rhetoric has largely lost its validity as HIMARS strikes have caused unease in KSK, Rostov, and even near Moscow. This most recent attack in particular has shattered the headquarters inviolability rule of Russian military doctrine. Headquarters areas were traditionally considered protected places. Now, officers, even generals, do not feel safe anywhere. This has the effect of undermining domestic support for Putin's occupation policies, because the Russian army can refute the Kremlin's message that everything is under control by saying we are being bombed even behind the front lines. It could also put Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin and the Russian military in a more difficult position than at any time since the beginning of the conflict. Such a security breach in the so-called behind the front lines is dealing a heavy blow to the logistics and command of the Russian military. So are the events and narratives information pollution or transparency. Global and local Russian and Western sources such as Mediazona, Kiev Independent, Newsweek, Charter 97, Politico, etc. are reporting that 3 Russian officers were killed in the attack. Some pro-Russian sources label this information as Western propaganda. What is really going on? At a time when the information war is at its fiercest, it is necessary to rely on evidence such as eyewitness reports, satellite images, or leaked radio conversations. The Russian side prefers to remain silent rather than say that our officers were not killed or that ammunition exploded accidentally. Only when the testimonies of personnel who survived a large-scale explosion are leaked can the true picture emerge. Intelligence services are also working to confirm this information. The FSB, the Russian intelligence service, has recently made statements such as, "We foiled Ukrainian plans to target Russian officers and pro-war bloggers." This implies that the war is not limited to the front line, but that there are also possible sabotage or assassination attempts inside Russia. If Ukraine is trying to eliminate media figures inside Russia, just as it is targeting commanders on the ground with weapons such as HIMARS, the information and psychological aspects of this war take on deeper meaning. However, how realistic or propagandistic the FSB's claims are is a matter of debate. What does the elimination of the deputy commander of the 155th Marine Brigade mean for the Russian Navy? The Russian Navy has been involved in certain phases of the Ukrainian war, although not often in ground operations. Elite units such as the 155th Marine Brigade are also active in ground operations when necessary. Now that a senior commander of this brigade was killed in the KSK attack, the elite status of the Russian Navy is being called into question. The loss of the command of a naval brigade in such an attack means not only a loss of morale, but also a loss of operational capability. Having previously suffered ship losses in the Black Sea, the Russian Navy is now losing its officers on the ground. This could hamper the cohesion and efficiency of the Marines on the ground. At the beginning of the war, the Black Sea Fleet and various naval units hoped to quickly gain the upper hand by threatening the Ukrainian coast. Now, however, the Marines and officers involved in ground operations are also targeted by HIMARS attacks. Russian naval units which have lost their command echelon both at sea and on land are experiencing great difficulties in terms of logistics and coordination. In fact, Newsweek reports that the 155th Marine Brigade lost its deputy commander in the KSK attack. This proves how fragile naval and ground coordination is at the officer level in Russia. The identities of deceased officers are gradually being revealed. Some are deputy commanders in the 155th Marine Brigade, while others are heads of logistics teams in Rostov. Even the photographs and short biographies of these names circulating on the internet reveal the key points at which the Russian military is vulnerable and which ranks are vacant. Good to know, stop. Ukrainian intelligence is carefully following this list through images captured by drones or documents obtained through cyber attacks. Information such as personnel movements, behind-the-scenes conferences, and planning meetings of the Russian army is collected. Then, point strikes are organized with HIMARS missiles. This strategy of targeted destruction is a major challenge to Russia's traditional military structure. These casualties are adding to the Russian army's losses of experienced officers. Independent Russian media sources and Ukrainian sources claim the loss of more than 4,100 Russian officers. What is the true extent of the losses? Sources such as Mediazona and Kiev Independent have been meticulously tracking officer casualties since the first days of Russia's all-out war against Ukraine. The figure cited is around 4,100. This is not just a few ranks, but a chain of command from generals to colonels, majors to lieutenants. In an army as large as Russia's, such a loss of officers makes it incredibly difficult to replenish the ranks and maintain operational efficiency. The operational success of an army depends on the cohesion of many elements, from the training of soldiers in the field to logistical planning, intelligence management, and psychological warfare. Officer cadres are in key positions to coordinate this cohesion. The death of 3 officers in the attack in KSK raises the question: what will be the morale of the survivors of such an attack? How motivated will Russian soldiers be to go to the front line after finding themselves one morning in their supposedly safe headquarters hit by HIMARS missiles and drones? The loss of senior officers creates indecision and fear in the military hierarchy. Especially in the Russian army, the role of commanders on the ground is quite dominant. The killing of 3 officers, even in a single headquarters, leaves the Russian military hierarchy with questions such as, well, where is our commander? Who is the new appointment? Who is setting up the defense plan? The demoralizing effect of the KSK offensive may also be reflected on the troops at the front. Credibility of orders from Moscow is enforced through the officers. When officers are killed, the chain of command is broken, orders are delayed, and troops are demotivated. The KSK offensive appears to be part of a deep offensive strategy that Ukraine is using against the Russian occupation. Targeting critical command centers in areas far from the front line forces Russia to pull its defense resources inland. Thus, gaps on the front in favor of Ukraine can emerge. Though there have been previous examples of Russian targets being hit simultaneously by HIMARS and drones. The main logic of these attacks is to paralyze Russia's logistics and command. KSK may be just another link in a larger chain, and we may hear similar news in other regions in the coming days. So, how do Russian soldiers deal with the loss of commanders? In an army, senior officers not only make strategic decisions, they are also the figures that sustain the morale of the troops. The news that 3 officers were killed in the KSK offensive leaves a vacuum of authority at the head of these units. Soldiers may question, where was our commander? If even he couldn't protect himself, how can we protect ourselves? Moreover, the fact that such attacks also take place in areas Russia considers relatively secure raises the unsettling question among troops: where are we safe? This undermines morale and motivation, and according to some reports, fuels rumors of increased desertion and demoralization among Russian soldiers. So, what is the secret behind the success of the KSK offensive? HIMARS, drones, or both? Ukrainian military intelligence reports that HIMARS and drones were used in coordination during the attack on the KSK region. This scenario is a typical reflection of Ukraine's recently developed multi-layered offensive strategy. While remotely launched HIMARS missiles are known for their high accuracy rates, drones perform intelligence gathering, guidance, and additional striking force functions. This combination creates a sudden and hard-to-escape blow on the ground. Russia's previous artillery and missile strikes on Ukrainian cities had prompted Kiev to develop more creative defense and offensive methods. The KSK attack proves that these methods are no longer just defensive, but are now combined with offensive capabilities. Given the necessary intelligence, any point within the range of HIMARS missiles is a target. Ukraine uses HIMARS systems mainly against fixed targets, logistics centers, and command posts. Thanks to advanced guidance systems, HIMARS rockets can sometimes hit the spot with a deviation of only a few meters. Drones play a dual role as reconnaissance and additional strike forces. Kamikaze drones cause panic, while reconnaissance drones pinpoint target coordinates. In the KSK attack, it is believed that drones determined where the command center was located, and HIMARS rockets were directed accordingly. This double blow leaves Russian defense systems in disarray, unable to determine whether to focus on the rockets or the drones. The officers, meanwhile, become instantly ineffective under the missile barrage. What makes the coup in KSK special? As a region relatively close to the Ukrainian border, KSK plays an important role in the logistics and supply lines of the Russian army. The command centers and warehouses established here are critical for the coordination of troops to be deployed to the front. Therefore, the fact that the latest attack hit exactly at the intersection of these logistical lines caught Russia off guard. After the attack, the Russian army may have to review its front line, take additional defense measures, and build new fortifications. This would prolong the resupply times of frontline troops and slow down Russia's military mobility along the Ukrainian border. Thus, the fever in KSK is not just the loss of a headquarters, but the risk of disrupting all war plans. The reactions of the Russian military, which has suffered losses on this scale, are also a matter of curiosity. So what is going on behind closed doors? Russia usually either denies such attacks or tries to pass them off as accidental explosions. There is a tendency to gloss over or downplay the deaths of senior officers in official statements. Sometimes the Russian press tries to cover up the situation with phrases such as ammunition depot accident instead of admitting to an attack. However, judging by the reports that even mention the names of 3 senior officers, this accidental explosion thesis lacks credibility. For Russia, denying this attack could lead to backlash from the families of the officers and increased perceptions of military failure. The KSK attack could also fuel Russian public opinion that nowhere is safe anymore. This could strain the Kremlin's domestic credibility. Moscow wanted to make air defense systems such as the S-300 and S-400 effective against HIMARS attacks. However, the high speed of HIMARS missiles, their low radar signature, and Ukraine's coordination with additional units make it difficult for defense systems to always intercept them. Drone attacks create even more uncertainty. Air defense systems are not always effective against small drones that fly low and slow. This undermines Russia's belief that headquarters are safe. The KSK attack clearly demonstrated this. Air defenses were insufficient to repel the attack. On the other hand, Russia usually likes to take advantage of the difficulties of winter conditions to make breakthroughs in ground operations. But the loss of senior officers and the wear and tear on logistics and intelligence units suggest that these winter plans may be disrupted. If the KSK offensive and similar blows continue, the Russian army's winter offensive could stumble before it even begins. Ukraine, on the contrary, may continue to carry out active offensives during this period, with winter equipment and weapon support from the West. The constant dropping of new names from the Russian command could tilt the war in Ukraine's favor. To summarize, Ukraine's HIMARS and drone attack on the KSK region killed 3 senior Russian officers and shattered the Russian military's perception of the front line as a complete safe zone. Sequential intelligence data, HIMARS accuracy, and drone coordination once again showed how vulnerable Russian headquarters are. Reports that Russia has lost more than 4,100 officers are not just statistics. Every loss of an officer creates a hole in the military's management and logistical backbone. Units that have lost their commanders are rapidly demotivated, while newly appointed officers struggle with a lack of experience. Moreover, this period is critical for winter operation plans. Ukraine, on the other hand, has signaled that it will continue to strike Russia's internal lines, training grounds, and command echelons with its skillful use of HIMARS and drones. In the coming months, we may witness even harsher Russian retaliation. But Russia's ability to retaliate is closely linked to the survival of its commanders. It is not sustainable to launch an offensive while suffering high officer casualties at the same time. In conclusion, the KSK attack is far from a coincidence. It is a highly planned move in Ukraine's pinpoint strategy. If the Kremlin fails to prevent further losses, it could face a major crisis of legitimacy both at home and at the front. In the final analysis, this recent KSK offensive demonstrated that Ukraine has taken its offensive capacity to a whole new level. We can safely say that we have entered a period in which Russian generals and officers are facing fear, and the Kremlin is struggling with its defensive arguments. The defense has taken a new stance. Late yesterday, the two countries met with Russia